Verse 310. Truth consists in the 5 Dharmas, and also the 3 Svabhavas. When the Yogin thus comprehends, he does not transgress Tathata. The previous verse was concerned with attaining Tathata, realizing Tathata. So now we're concerned about becoming established in Tathata. And we've got a couple more lists here, the 5 Dharmas and the 3 Svabhavas. And we've got a few verses coming up which consists of a lot of lists. After this we've got some verses concerning the elements, and then we've got lots of verses with lots of lists. So I thought I'd give you one of my own. The 4 Maya-like Samadhis. Now, I don't think you'll find this list in any text, because it's something I've identified myself. I identified it when I was looking up about these 5 Dharmas. The 3 Svabhavas are actually included in the 5 Dharmas, so we don't need to worry about the 3 Svabhavas. There are also videos, past videos on the Svabhavas. If you look up the subject index, you'll find videos, or you'll find a video on the Svabhavas. And this is the truth. The truth doesn't consist of any kind of list. These lists are practical applications of spiritual practice. And in looking up the main body of the text in the Lankavatara Sutra on the 5 Dharmas, which I'll start covering in the next video, by the way, there was this phrase which I felt needed to be delved into in a lot more detail. I'll just read the particular sentence. It's from chapter 83 of the Lankavatara Sutra. He's talking about the Yogins here, the spiritual, the enlightenment practitioners. So when these 5 Dharmas and so on are thoroughly comprehended by the Yogins, they enter into the course of the Tathagata's inner realization. So this is Tathata, where they are kept away from such views as eternalism and nihilism, realism and negativism. And this is where we come face to face with the abode of happiness. So it was these 4 terms: eternalism, nihilism, realism and negativism, which I felt bore a little looking into, to the extent that I would regard them as the basis of these 4 Maya-like Samadhis, because they bring you to the abode of happiness. Now there's one point that needs to be made here. In fact, you're probably wondering it yourself. Such views, this all seems a bit philosophical, doesn't it? Such views as eternalism, nihilism, realism and negativism. Are we not just getting into philosophical territory? Well, I'm going to put it to you that in these 4 terms we have a way of dealing with some of the deepest and darkest aspects of our psyche. It's a bit of a pity that I'm not experiencing some of this right now, because then I could talk about it with more emphasis. I should really have recorded this video a few days ago when I was right in the throes of it. Almost as if some demonic entity had inhabited my psyche. It's a completely loveless state. You feel like you're on the brink of the abyss. You can describe it as depression, as anxiety, as fear, as loneliness, feeling dead inside. I made a list. And I was feeling this way as I read these 4 terms. And it's so easy to gloss over them. It's so easy to gloss over them. Yes, just a bit of philosophy here. But the thing is, philosophy wasn't the academic cerebral activity which we seem to think of it as nowadays. At the time of the Buddha, in India and also in Greece, a philosophy determined your lifestyle. You lived according to a particular philosophy. And in this way, we are all philosophers. We all have a particular lifestyle. That lifestyle expresses our philosophy. So a philosophy isn't some kind of ivory tower activity. It's about examining in detail our very lifestyle. Our lifestyle reflects our essential outlook. It reflects the tone of our existence. So this is what we have to look at. And I should point out that by and large it's not a very pretty picture. There's a quote from Jung here which a Facebook contact just by chance posted on his Facebook wall. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So this isn't a feel-good video. This is about making the darkness conscious. Flushing it out. It's very uncomfortable, very painful. This is what these videos are about. If you're looking for some platitudes to make you feel better, then this isn't for you. Jung has a little go at imagining figures of light, and this is quite a nice thing to do. And if you're an enlightenment practitioner, it's a great thing to do. But otherwise, it's nothing more than a coping mechanism. It helps you get by. We need to flush this darkness through our system, which means acknowledging it fully without dwelling on it. So what's this got to do with eternalism, nihilism, realism and negativism? Well, the first two, eternalism and nihilism, refer to how you feel about yourself. And the second two, realism and negativism, are how you feel about the world. And it isn't that we are one or the other. We are all four. We move between eternalism and nihilism, and we move between realism and negativism. Now, fundamentally, eternalism is the feeling that you've got history and you've got future. you go on forever and ever and ever. Now you might believe this in a religious sense, that you've got future lives, or that you're going to go to heaven or hell after this life is over. Or you might be pursuing it in terms of acquiring fame and recognition. You want to go on forever and ever. You want people to acknowledge you, know who you are, to love you. Maybe you'll do it through having lots of kids. Carry on your gene pool. And there's a great enthusiasm for genealogy, finding out where you came from, where your genes came from, or maybe past lives or whatever. So you've got this sense that you can continue into the future, and you've got this history going right back to stardust or whatever. Nihilism is the opposite, of course. Nihilism is the feeling that you're nothing inside. You're nothing. You come from dust and you'll return to dust. There's a big vacuum there. You're not worth anything. And I hope it's not too stretch of the imagination to see how you can flip between the two. If you feel this way, then you might be encouraged to go out there and prove yourself that you are a person of worth. You are a person worth acknowledging. So this eternalist viewpoint is driven by a nihilist viewpoint. So it's very easy to slip between the two, switch between the two at different levels. It's not that you're one or the other. It's not that you're an eternalist or a nihilist. You're both. There's a dynamic here operating within you. And this is mirrored in our relationship with the world. Sometimes we take our cue from the world. We believe that's what we should be relating to. This is realism. This is the world. We've got to get on with it. We've got things to get on with. This is reality. This stage that we call the world is what we take our cue from. This is what we relate to. Or we can reject the world, and this rejection can take many different forms. This is negativism. We can reject it as nothing worthwhile out there. There's nothing worth getting involved in. It's all pointless, a sick joke. Or if we're more spiritual, we might say it's all illusion. It's all illusion. Mustn't take it seriously. So we reject it that way as well. Some people see this as a spiritual thing. So we can flip between the two, can't we? Between taking our cue from the world and rejecting the world. We don't like what we see. It's not worth getting involved in. Let's go and live in a remote island somewhere. So we flip between these. These are the views of the philosophers, and they determine our lifestyle. This is what we all are. This is a dynamic that we're switching between eternalism and nihilism, and realism and negativism. And I thought I'd give some examples. I'll start with a rather extreme example. That of the suicide bomber. Because sometimes taking an extreme example gives a bit of clarity. So, the suicide bomber is all four of these: eternalist, nihilist, realist and negativist. And hopefully this is quite obvious. But the suicide bomber is an eternalist. I'm talking about the most well known of the breed of suicide bombers, the Islamist or jihadist. suicide bombers, they've got the promise of paradise. So they're not bothered about the death of the physical body, which is a nihilist point of view, because they've got all their virgins in paradise to look forward to. Yeah, good trade-off. So that's both eternalist and nihilist. And this corresponds to their views of the world. They're taking their cue from a certain understanding of things out in the world. And there's all these infidels which it's your religious duty to destroy by whatever means possible. So that's very real. That's very real. They're taking their cue from the world. This is the realism and the society and subculture within which they're operating. So they're being very realist here, taking their cue from the reality around them, the reality of the world around them, and all the perceived injustices which they want redress for. And it's negativism in the sense that not only do they reject the world as they see it, but they're dependent on a belief structure. They're not interested in taking any opportunity to modify their belief structure. It's that belief structure which they're hanging on to. So in this way, they reject the world. They're rejecting the world. So this is negativism. They're replacing the world and all the indications that the world gives in favour of their own belief structure. So this is extreme negativism. So there's the suicide bomber. Suicide bombers, all four. Now we can apply this to some of our deepest, most uncomfortable feelings. Feelings of loneliness, feelings of being dead inside, feelings of being bored, feelings of depression, feelings of being caught up in particular addictions or damaging fetishes, feelings of fear, anxiety. That was a list that came to mind. Maybe there's other ones that I've missed out. But let's just take loneliness. Loneliness. Abject loneliness. Loneliness is a natural feeling. Most of us need company, we need friends, we need affection. So that's normal. That's normal. And you can go out, and there are various mechanisms by which you can engage with other people. It depends how deep this loneliness is, though. You can actually feel lonely being surrounded by people. So there's something else going on here, isn't there? You can even be getting the love of others and still feel lonely. It's quite extraordinary. So there's something deeper going on here. And it's these four factors which are coming into play here. Eternalism. Somehow you might feel you haven't got your soulmate. You're not connecting. You're not being nourished in some very deep, perhaps even spiritual level. We want some kind of lasting fulfillment. This is eternalism once again. We're looking for a connection which is with somebody else that is somehow going to resolve something forevermore. Now the nihilistic aspect is the feeling that time is running out. There's not much time. We're going to perish. I've got my old age to look forward to, if I'm lucky. So our eternalism is being driven once again by nihilism. And to satisfy this feeling, we look out there, we look out into the so-called real world again. We're looking out there into what we regard as the reality of the world. This is realism again. But we might also reject it, saying that it's a lost cause. What chance is there? There's nothing out there that's going to suit me. There's the feeling of being depressed or feeling dead inside. And the eternalist aspect is that you feel a heaviness of spirit. There's something deep inside, a deep tone which is rather dark. And you feel like this is reality. This is how things are. Happy people are missing the point. They're not seeing the truth as you see it, of deep, despondent despair. So this dark feeling seems like it's always there. When you're in this state, you feel that this is it. It's not going to shift. You don't even think about it shifting or disappearing. You give it an eternal quality. And this is why people kill themselves. They're being both eternalistic and nihilistic at the same time. They really feel this is it. It's a very insidious quality of this dark feeling. It somehow convinces you that this is how it's always going to be. So this is the eternalist. And as I say, it's nihilist. Because you get the feeling, what's the point? What's the point of anything? What's the point of trying? There's nothing in the world out there. So you're being realist in the sense that you're looking out there, but you're being negativist in saying, well, there's nothing out there that can do anything. So you're feeding your eternalism, nihilism by realism and negativism. So I think that's quite a clear example too. You just think it's all rubbish. It's all rubbish. So can we get a handle on this? Can we get a handle on it? Well, I found this very useful because I get this wave coming over me. My wife thinks it's like my menstrual cycle. And she might have a point. It's quite awful when it descends. But just being able to get a handle on it, just being able to see what's going on. It doesn't get rid of the feeling, but it stops you from feeding it. And this is what's important. It stops you from feeding it. The feeling lifted after a few days as if it'd never been there. This is another insidious aspect of it. You feel, oh, it's gone now, or you don't even think about it, you're just feeling okay. And then it will come on again at some point. There'll be some anxiety which might trigger it. Fear and anxiety, that's another good one. Fear and anxiety is eternalist because it's based on fear of the future and anxieties built from the past, and anxieties developed from the past. You're worried about what the future is going to bring, and you look at your past experience. So again, it's eternalist in that you're not looking in the moment, you're not living in the moment, you're living in the past and the future, or a very filtered past and a very imagined future. So it's nihilist in that You only think in terms of damage or loss. These are the parameters of your existence. You just think in terms of all the bad things that can happen. And it's not just thinking about it, it's feeling. This is how you feel. So, the world out there, you're realist. This is how life is. It's going to get you at some point. It's negativist because you want to reject the world as a threatening place. You want some sort of escape from it. So, getting some handle on this is very liberating, which is why I'd refer to these 4 things as Samadhis. And they're Maya-like, where we've had Maya-like Samadhis before, because they are cues from Maya, the discomfort of Maya. And some people might recommend getting some medication for some of these problems, and it's a course of action which I wouldn't disagree with. It's not one that I've ever followed myself. I've never tried medication. I suppose I feel I've got something to work with here, and I'm not permanently crippled. Sometimes I'm temporarily crippled by these feelings, but I find working through this text very liberating in this regard. So these are the 4 Maya-like Samadhis. They're triggered by eternalism, nihilism, realism, and negativism. And we'll be looking at the context in which they appear in the next video, when we'll look at the 5 Dharmas.